Welcome to Crossroads. Chinese companies already own a good chunk of the video game market. Now, as we speak, the Chinese Communist Party has been taking notice of this, and the gaming industry, for China at least, is now being treated as a type of soft power tool to target the West. Money from video games, including one of the most popular ones out there, is right now being used to fund technologies with deep CCP interest. And given the regime's laws on data collection, one of the lesser known markets for video games is also coming into focus, and that is large-scale data collection. Now, just as a brief overview, Chinese companies are already involved with some of the biggest video games currently in the world. China's Tencent, for example, they fully own Riot Games, the developer of League of Legends, which is a video game with around 150 million players. Tencent, they have a majority stake in around 40% in Epoch Games, which is the developer of Fortnite, with around 500 million registered users. It's also heavily involved with PUBG Mobile and helps distribute the game through a subsidiary. That game has around 400 million registered users. And it doesn't end there. They also own a stake in 80% in Grinding Gear Games, developer of Path of Exile, and with these alone, it has a good amount of control over some of the biggest games currently in existence. And again, it doesn't end there. There's a long list of other games, and Tencent also has majority ownership of Funcom, Sumo Digital, Shark Mob, Supercell, Klai Entertainment, and a long list of others. In addition to notably stakes in Ubisoft, Bluehole, Frontier Development, Paradox Interactive, Fat Shark, Platinum Games, Jaeger, and Activision Blizzard. And even this is not all of them. There's been chatter even that Tencent is trying to buy controlling shares in many of these companies. They even have a stake in Discord, notably one of the top chat apps often used for video games. And they even own WeChat, in fact. The messaging app, of course, is huge in China and outside of China. Now, given this, China's move to buy up a good chunk of the gaming industry, it's not even just Tencent. That's just one company. There's a few other big companies, but NetEase has been making headlines lately as well, since a racing game tied to it called Once Human has now risen to become one of the most played games currently on the market. Now, of course, I'm not making any accusations against these companies themselves. In fact, the Chinese Communist Party has actually cracked down pretty hard on them in the past, because of its strict laws within China on video games. But the problems are coming up mainly because of that. The CCP has strict laws on video games, as well as strict laws on entertainment products in general. The messages that video games contain and the movies that they contain, such as requirements that they reflect core socialist values, and also the CCP's laws on things like data collection, the regime's access to user data, how they can go into that, and also the way the communist regime tends to leverage the use of products when they begin to have foreign influence, soft power. Now, we can compare this in some ways to the long drama of TikTok, and notably of the Chinese company it was under, ByteDance. ByteDance, you might remember, they also ran into problems with the Chinese Communist Party, and its former CEO had to write a self-criticism letter promising to use the company to advance the interests of the Communist Party, and notably, even in his own letter, to align his company with the so-called Xi Jinping thought and the agendas for the rest of the world under Xi Jinping thought. That's the official version of communism now under the Chinese Communist Party. Now, look, while the CCP's influence over Hollywood and movies, that's facing scrutiny, just like its influence over e-commerce apps like Temu and Shein, or its influence over social media like with TikTok. All of these are facing some form of scrutiny outside of China. And a lot of that scrutiny has been on the above issues, the same ones with video games. Concerns that the Chinese Communist Party can access user data from the companies. Concerns that the CCP may be even leveraging some of these companies and the things they're doing for its own interests. But the CCP's influence over video games has been somewhat of a blind spot in global regulations, despite the fact that in terms of big data, content for children, and especially the amounts of money involved, video games are right up there in terms of reach and significance, maybe even greater in fact. But there are now some early signs that this is changing, interestingly, within China. One of the most anticipated games on the horizon right now is the Made in China Black Myth Wukong, which comes out next month. And this has been touted by Chinese state media as China's blitz to develop, instead of just acquire, a top game of its own. Now look, back in 2020, South China Morning Post declared, quote, "As the mobile gaming market reaches saturation, Chinese companies are now looking to compete in the premium space with a new generation of titles under the industry's informal AAA classification, the top line of video games, in other words." And this is also now bringing some attention from outside of China. Newslines magazine recently had this to say: "A highly anticipated release based on Journey to the West shows the evolution of both an art form and a conduit of Communist Party influence." They say politically, Chinese premium games like Black Myth Wukong also promise to elevate the international standing of China's gaming industry and, by extension, its society as a whole. And they add further in that if the central effort in achieving President Xi Jinping's Chinese dream of national rejuvenation and international status is, as the chairman once put it, telling Chinese stories well, then the Communist Party, the CCP, could not have hoped for a better ambassador than Black Myth Wukong, whose imminent release is awaited by millions across the globe. Now, the magazine also notes that the game represents a type of nationalistic sentiment being promoted by CCP propaganda. And there was something shocking as well that took place just recently. One of the top games on the market, also controlled by Chinese companies, is now using some of its profits to finance one of the Communist Party's main pushes to develop nuclear fusion energy. I'll be talking more about this after we come back from a quick break.
Experts agree, one of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome back. The global video game market is being dominated by Chinese companies, and the Chinese Communist Party seems to have a lot of interest in this. Now, as things are currently happening, the gaming industry in China is being utilized by the Chinese Communist Party as a soft power move on the West. This was something that took place just recently, in fact, which may shock some of you. One of the top games on the market, also controlled by Chinese companies, is now using profits from its game to finance one of the Communist Party's main pushes to develop nuclear fusion energy. The game is Genshin Impact, one of the most popular games in the world. It's a free-to-play RPG that generates billions of dollars each year. Its developer, MiHoYo, is a major investor as well in Energy Singularity, which is working on a tokamak reactor. Windows Central says this: widely regarded as the holy grail of energy generation, tokamak fusion reactors are massive donut-shaped magnets to superheat plasma, 10 times hotter than the center of the sun, in fact, in order to recreate sun-like fusion reactions. It says the heat generated is then absorbed by the tokamak and then used to power a turbine, leaving only steam as a byproduct. It notes that MiHoYo's very own tokamak fusion reactor has now been activated. And they note as well, China has recently ignited yet another superconducting tokamak nuclear fusion reactor in Shanghai, second after Hefei. Privately funded, constructed, and operated by a gaming company, MiHoYo, developer of Genshin Impact. They say that it's the first tokamak owned by a non-state actor. And they note further in that MiHoYo's fusion reactor is in partnership with the Shanghai-based Energy Singularity, and according to local news reports, the tokamak is now generating plasma reactions for the first time. Now, on that note briefly, the Chinese Communist Party has been pushing very hard to develop fusion energy reactors. Fusion is kind of seen as the next generation of nuclear power plants. They're more advanced. They work through fusion, though, rather than nuclear fission. So you merge atoms instead of splitting them, basically. A handful of countries in the world, they have been trying for decades to develop this technology, nuclear fusion. And it's believed that whoever succeeds in this is going to dominate the future energy market globally. But speaking of the video game tied in with funding China's push for fusion reactors, Genshin Impact, it's also being touted by the CCP as a tool for soft power. The Diplomat says this: Genshin Impact was the first Chinese video game to become a global hit. Its overseas revenues are greater than earnings in its home country, China, setting it far apart from other Chinese video games. It notes that Genshin Impact's success, both inside and outside of China, has given it a worldwide player base and considerable forum buzz, and has encouraged countless derivative works. Further, they state that Genshin Impact's increasingly close relationship with Chinese authorities seems to confirm its crucial role as a soft power tool. Now, as you might expect, Genshin Impact also got attention a few years ago when players accused it of censoring players in the chat, particularly on issues were tied to the CCP's human rights abuses. The Guardian said this back in 2020. A popular new game, Genshin Impact, is censoring words including Taiwan, Hong Kong, Falun Gong, and Putin in the in-game chat, according to players. And this brings up one of the biggest issues with the Chinese gaming market. Again, it's not necessarily the companies themselves or developers themselves. The problems, it comes from the Chinese Communist Party's control of the industry through heavy regulation. And some of those regulations, like censorship or data surveillance or soft power requirements, and a long list of other things, these tend to represent serious concerns abroad. The CCP's regulatory bodies, they've been cracking down on the video game industry in China for years. But this squeezing of the industry from the CCP seems to have let up just fairly recently. CCP regulators under the National Press and Publication Administration had draft rules that, if passed, would have restricted the use of rewards for players in video games, it says. But suddenly, the regime dropped the rules, and this led to stocks of Tencent and NetEase to jump around 6 and 7%. Now, the history of the Chinese Communist Party's moves against the video game industry within China, it actually goes back pretty far. They even forced some Western developers to alter their game in order to align with CCP entertainment requirements on so-called core socialist values. I'll be talking more about the Chinese video game market and the Chinese Communist Party and how it's using games as tools for soft power, and also how the CCP no longer considers video games apolitical, how they have requirements to make it so that games now have to highlight a, quote, correct set of values under the CCP, and so-called accurate understandings of China's history and culture, revisionist history, in other words. I'll be talking about this exclusively on EpochTV.com. That's the uncensored streaming platform of the Epoch Times. So if you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, X, Rumble, there's a link in the description below. You can click on that and get access to the rest of this episode. And not only that, but you'll also get access to my whole library of shows and also family-friendly movies, premium investigative reports, and hard-hitting documentaries on issues that really matter, like the Chinese Communist Party's 100-year plan to defeat the United States, which I expose in my documentary, The Final War. The CCP is one of the biggest threats to America. They're using things like video games, entertainment, movies, culture, all of this to subvert and influence the next generation. This unrestricted war against our country is one of the scariest but least understood issues of our time because it's not tangible. There's no tanks or bombs. It's all being done through soft power means and ideological subversion. I spent over a decade investigating the CCP's subversion, and it's such an important issue that I've dedicated my career to warning people about the threats of the CCP. If you'd like to find out more about what exactly the CCP is plotting against America, then watch The Final War. You can find the link in the description below, and I'll show you all a trailer before we go exclusively to EpochTV.com for the rest of the episode. I'll see you there.
The greatest threat facing the United States is the CCP.
The Epoch Times investigation team had studied the CCP for years, but what we uncovered was yielding evidence beyond our imagination.
With Chairman Mao, with the Prime Minister, our talks have been characterized by frankness.
The Clinton administration said, oh, don't worry about it. This will be a poison pill for China.
China's strategic goal is to make sure that the U.S. has 4 enemies, and one of them must be a terrorist group.
We are giving of our life's blood so that the Chinese Communist Party can survive and thrive.